Live everywhere on netrootsradio.com. David Waldman, Kagro, in the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
All right, hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Monday, March 27th, 2023. Time for another show. No school today. That's good news. So that's not happening in the background. Still unable to get Soundboard to accept the large sound file. So still, a second or two off the mark, and coming up with an alternative procedure that isn't so terrible, but is not smooth. But I have some alternatives in mind. Always thinking about how to fix things up around here when not busy thinking up things to fix up things around other places anyway. Okay, well, I should take care of things at home. It is time to go. That's true. Hey, John Shifflett is with us already this morning, tweeting around his warning to the world that Kagro in the Morning with me is live at 9 a.m. ET, because that's what time it is. Okay, and we're about 2-3 seconds behind on that one. And if you want to get really technical, there's something you can do, John, each day and say, well, you went live at 9:01 and 2 seconds. Which, okay, well, fine. At 9 a.m. we're supposed to play the 1-minute intro to the show. And then all of a sudden, bang, and we go. But the intro to the show is all musical. I don't know exactly why did we do that? At one point it made sense. I think when we were just setting up Netroots Radio, and I guess it makes sense now too. Just that 1-minute interlude in between the hold music, essentially. It's like telephone hold music for Justice over at Netroots Radio, just to let him know that we're connected. And then we roll this instrumental for a minute, which is kind of like, okay, well, you're connected, we're still connected, and now you got a minute to go, and I don't know why. Why did we not do that at 8:59 so that at 9 a.m. we were ready to roll? Well, I don't know. I like this practice, and I'll never figure out how to change it at this point, since I can't even make it work the regular way. Okay, well, anyway, lots happening over the weekend. More basketball that I didn't know how it was going to go. And the more I don't know about how it's going to go and therefore get it all wrong, the less I care about what's going on and finding out who's actually winning, except that I see how badly I'm doing. Although everybody was doing poorly. I think, what did we find out over the weekend? This was the first time since 1740, you know how it is with basketball, long history with basketball. First time ever in the modern format, or whatever the hell, the NCAA tournament has changed over the years. But the first time since they went to this new format in like the 70s, that every single number one seed in the 4 different regions had been knocked out of the Final Four. No number one seeds made it to the Final Four. It's obviously a relative rarity. It hasn't happened up to this point. But not all number one seeds make it all the time anyway. So there's usually a good mix of 1, 2, 3, 4s and the occasional surprise upset winner. But everything was turned upside down by a lot of number one seeds going out, particularly early in the tournament, and other top seeds as well. So if you are a basketball fan and you spent the weekend watching, I don't know. Congratulations to you. If you also managed to keep up with the news, congratulations on that as well. You're multitasking. If you did neither, why don't you host today's show and tell us about what you did? I did see a little bit of the basketball, just because it's sort of mind-numbing. I get to watch, and okay, hey, these kids are pretty good at playing this sport, and that's pretty good, and it's enjoyable to watch them having a good time. And then news happens. I saw a couple of things over the weekend. I don't know whether I would say there's any one hot item on Twitter today, but I think we might have to have a little sampling of what's going on in Israel, just because it's so serious and strange and difficult to understand from here, difficult to understand from there. And if it's difficult to understand, we're going to want to take it up here on Kagro in the Morning. But it's getting very serious. Actually, some unrest around the world. Russia must be really loving it. I don't know whether they really feel like they had any hand in any of these things, but they're certainly enjoying freebies, I guess, if they didn't direct this stuff. But large-scale, certainly large-scale unrest in Israel, which is apparently resulting in strikes, labor strikes everywhere. And the university system is apparently shutting down and going on strike. Also, large-scale strikes, well, this is always the case. Large-scale strikes in France, which is to say it's Monday, time for a large-scale strike. They are pretty proficient at it, but we've talked about it before. It's been going on for some time. And Germany now, I think, having a transport strike as well. I think air travel is the target of this one. So lots going on, lots of unrest coming together all at once, and I'm not certain whether anybody has analyzed it from the standpoint of what does it all mean altogether. I don't know if it means the same thing everywhere. So, the world may be complex. Other international complexities we can explore as well, some that my brother Mark sent on to me, but let's see what we have time for today as we begin our sampler with Greg Dworkin, who's here how's UConn doing in either contest for that matter?
Well, the UConn women lost, unfortunately, which is, not surprising. They had an injury-riddled team this year, but they'll be back.
Okay.
And UConn men are in the Final Four.
Okay. Well,
for the first time since 2014, along with 3 other teams that have never been there, I think.
Oh, yeah. Well, there's some real surprises and some teams that have been in the tournament a lot but never made it this far, and so it's exciting. I'd say good for you, kids.
Good for the kids.
Yeah.
And hope UConn wins, but these things happen the way these things happen.
Yeah. If UConn wins, my pool is split 18 ways because they're all the people in my pool are from Connecticut. They've been waiting a long time to win this.
Let's talk Israel a little.
All right. They're not even in this, so perfect.
They weren't in the pool of, who was going to be in the Final Four for basketball, but they certainly were in the Final Four for unrest.
Yes, and the Final Four for the apocalypse
they had 6 elections in 15 minutes.
They're all
they may
of
well be on their way to a 7th based on what's going on. So you have to set the background a little bit. Israel is evenly split electorally at these elections between the Likud and religious parties on the one hand, who are Netanyahu's supporters, Benjamin Netanyahu, Bibi Netanyahu, who is the current prime minister.
Again.
And the secularists, who have various and sundry rotating coalitions. Yair Lapid, Benny Gantz, and others who may be fairly conservative, but are not supporters of the religious party. Why is that important? Because Israeli society, in order to exist, is based on everybody has to do service in the army.
Yes.
It's just, an existential thing for Israel because they're surrounded by hostile neighbors, in their view. Yes. We're skipping the Palestinian discussion for the moment.
Yes, well, they're hostile too.
Yes,
okay,
and they're not external.
Right, they're just in there.
Right. So the point is, you have to serve. It's just like the basis for Israeli society. Now the ultra-Orthodox come along. And they say, well, we need to be exempt from that because we have to go to yeshiva. We have to go to training, religious training. We have to be in school. We get a school deferment, a student deferment.
Essentially, yeah.
And we're all students, every single one of us. So half the country doesn't have to do this.
Yeah.
And the other half of the country has to support them. That's the background. And that's important background because when you look and see now where the protests are coming from,
yes,
including reservists in the army, the defense minister, these are people who are representing that faction, which says it's not fair that we have to do all the work and you get to do nothing and then tell us what to do.
Yes, and
so
I'm sure
deep
it's pretty
resentment
galling.
there is part of what's fueling this. So then Netanyahu's a crook and gets indicted and wants to with the help of the religious parties, reform the judiciary. That's in scare quotes, and it should be scare quotes. Because among the things that Netanyahu wants to do is to make sure that he doesn't get indicted.
Yes, that sounds familiar.
And the other thing is that the people who are on the religious coalition, often because they're a religious organization, akin to a church in this country, they don't pay taxes.
So this is some
deal.
You've
got a number of fault lines in religious and non-religious secular society that are coming to a head now, because essentially what you're seeing is a revolt of the secularists saying, this is too much. This is ridiculous. We already support the entire society by ourselves with you guys doing nothing.
Yes.
And now you're trying to change the rules so that you can be Florida and Wisconsin and Ohio, and so make it so that we can never win.
Yeah,
and we're not having it. We are simply not going to, and that's what you're seeing before your eyes. So Netanyahu wins the last election by a tiny hair without running on the platform of changing the judiciary. And as soon as he gets in, he announces he's changing the judiciary. And people get upset.
Yes.
And they start to push back. And the religious parties who were part of his governing coalition say, well, we're not going to change our mind. This is what we need to do.
Right.
And by the way, if we get to appoint the judiciary for balance, so that they don't get ahead of themselves and ahead of their skis and try to tell us we can't do stuff, then we need to change the judiciary and make it the way we want. And the secularists say you can't do that. You didn't run on that. And even some people who voted for you didn't know that you were doing that. And so basically you're doing it really, you're using this, judicial reform as an excuse to prevent yourself from being indicted or serving. Some of your ministers have already been told by the courts that they can't serve because they're crooks too, and you want to change that and run the judiciary as well as everything else. And lo and behold, you've got hundreds of thousands in a small country out in the streets in Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, and the smaller cities.
And small streets as well.
Bnei Brak and Beersheba, and some places like Bnei Brak, which are fairly strong Likud strongholds. And they're still out in the street protesting because this is just too much. So they're putting a tremendous amount of pressure on Netanyahu to back off. The religious parties are putting a tremendous amount of pressure on Netanyahu not to back off. So it's a standoff. And today a general strike was called, which means the Israeli airport is closed down, businesses are closed. Everybody assumed that this amount of pressure is simply intolerable, and Netanyahu will back off. And there are reports that, in fact, he's already told Biden he's going to back off in this judicial reform, but he hasn't informed the Israeli population yet.
But don't tell them.
Well, Israel runs by...
You got to have to tell them at some point.
It's just one of those societies that does that.
Okay.
So the thought is, because he's backed off on this announcement about changing course on the judicial reform, which is driving the protests, it's already been announced that he's going to say something to the entire nation, and that's been canceled 3 times. So the current thinking is the reason he's delaying the inevitable is that he wants to give the right-wing supporters of his a chance to rally, and they're going to do that at 6 p.m. Israel time. It's 2 hours from now.
Okay.
And then he'll announce that he's going to change course. And the reason he's doing that, so says the speculation, is that if he announces now and then there's a big right-wing rally, they'll be mad at him. But if he lets the rally start and then immediately after the rally starts, he announces it, he can say at the same time, but look at this rally supporting me, telling me to be strong. So I'm in a good position.
Maybe.
It's the exact same situation, but it's window dressing. That's Israeli society. That's Netanyahu. And so that's what you can expect.
Yeah, all right. Well, okay.
So in a
Dress those
nutshell,
windows.
that's your abbreviated pundit roundup of what's going on in Israel.
In Israel. Okay. Yeah. Well, it's
If you have any questions, right,
fracture.
David? Especially if you have corrections, right,
Oh,
David?
sure.
It's his show.
Yeah. Write me in Hebrew. I can say, I don't know what that means.
Right to left.
Yeah. So, well, they've got a lot going on, and it is difficult. It's a hell of a situation, especially dealing with these religious parties, which traditionally also a lot of these the ultra orthodox, while they didn't serve in the army, I don't know, for a large portion of Israel's history, they also weren't particularly vocal or militant about how to deal with Palestinians and Israel's neighbors. They just left that to the army and the secularists. But now a lot of them, being settlers in the territories, occupied territories, they've gone militant, but they won't serve in the military, and they demand defense but won't provide it. And then there's a new movement among ultra-religious settlers where they say, we won't serve in the army, but we will arm ourselves and shoot at Palestinians, but we're not going to do it in any organized fashion. And then when we get in trouble because we don't know what we're doing, we need the army to defend us, but we won't serve in that army. I could see where that could lead to some resentment. Sure.
Yeah, and so that's it's really causing a lot of. But you have to understand that part of it to really understand the deep resentment that the army has. So now you have the armed settlers on the one hand, supported by the religious parties, who actually, at this particular point in time, are outgunned by the army.
Yes.
Who, by definition, are seculars. Otherwise, they wouldn't be in the army.
Right. Now, they're supposed to be outgunned by the army, but but it was never an issue where the army and the settlers were at odds, and now they're at odds. And,
unlike the United States, where the right-wing nutcases can say, hey, if there's a civil war bringing on, we have all the guns. In Israel, they don't.
That's true. Although I think probably a lot of right-wing, we have a pretty significant history of small pockets of right-wing people who think they're bringing on the revolution and think they can win it, and they don't. Their compounds
if you're interested in
down.
Following this on Twitter, and again, this is one of those situations where you look, and I've looked on Mastodon, I've looked on Post, I've looked on Spoutable. If you really want to follow this moment to moment, you got to use Twitter.
Yeah,
that's where the people
the Israelis haven't left Twitter for Mastodon.
So the two people that I'm following right now, and there's many others you could do.
All right.
But I'm following Noga Tarnopolsky.
Okay.
And Anshel Pfeffer, Pfeffer. You can follow those two people and get up to the moment going on. Here's Anshel Pfeffer just tweeting right now what I was telling you. Right-wing front groups now starting to fill Twitter with promoted tweets calling for, quote, an emergency situation. We're going to Jerusalem. We won't allow the elections to be stolen from us. Netanyahu's looking for a showdown on the street. Why is he waiting? This seems to be the answer. His Telegram bots, which have been collecting contact details for weeks, have suddenly started sending out calls to arrive at the right-wing protests in Jerusalem this evening. That's in 2 hours. He wants a show of force on the streets first. Then he gets to announce whatever it is he's going to announce. Now, there's various and sundry ministers, Likud party, religious parties, who have already come out in public for or against what's going on. So he's splitting his party, splitting his coalition over this.
Yes, I've seen a bit of that.
All right. The worst of them,
I can't explain it,
Ben Gvir says, if you do this, I will resign.
Yes.
And everybody else is thinking, okay, hot lips, resign your commission.
Right.
Go ahead.
I mean,
it would be good for us. The defense minister, Levin, is probably going to be the one blamed for all of this.
Yes. Was he not already dismissed, or I don't know?
No, people are now calling for his dismissal because you got to blame somebody, and you can't blame Netanyahu because that's not how it works. Ask Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So,
okay.
So, and Levin has already said, I'll support whatever the prime minister comes up with, including if he decides to hold off on this.
Okay.
So that's like Kud trying to split the baby there, trying to say, well, we'll support whatever the prime minister wants, and then telling privately the prime minister, you got to stop this. We've got 600,000 people on the street, and they're sitting in front of the Knesset trying to break in, telling us to resign, and they're outside your house.
Yeah, and there's only 700,000 people in the place.
And so, like, this is big. You can't do this. And so,
Okay.
it's very tense, but this is a live report of what's going on at the moment. And in a couple of hours, we'll see what's going on.
Okay. We'll talk about, how about our own politics even, maybe, in between now and then, and give them a chance to settle what the news is going to be.
Let me just throw in Ukraine before that.
Oh, yeah, okay.
International.
Well, we're moving
and then France, and then we'll get the U.S.
Yeah, I like this.
They're quick.
Going westerly. That's fine.
Okay, so in Ukraine, really, Bakhmut does seem to be at a culmination point. Russians aren't really advancing any. And there's plenty of reports saying, well, the Ukrainians are now saying they're exactly where they want to be in Bakhmut, and they're getting ready for the counteroffensive.
I see. Ooh.
So listening to Phillips O'Brien and some of the other experts, not named New York Times or other U.S. reports, but rather looking at the international experts, it seems that the way they described it is exactly right. What they did was they set up Bakhmut to be a place where a lot of Russians could get slaughtered, including the Wagner Group, which itself might be in the process of being dissolved.
Well, okay.
And the head of the Wagner Group is really upset because he's not getting the support he feels like he needs from the Kremlin.
Uh-oh.
And that's,
like
the way it goes.
No floor beneath him anymore. He's out a window.
Right. So again, all of the, they're going to lose in Bakhmut, and why haven't they withdrawn stories from a couple of weeks ago all seem like semi-dated at this particular point in time.
Well.
And then moving on to France.
Okay, a little more to the west.
It's interesting because, yes, it's certainly true that Macron had the gavel and therefore could push through rules that nobody else wanted, or at least nobody else wanted to take the fall for. Yes. So he did that, and now protests in the street every night. As you said, it's France. But this is the Fifth Republic?
Still? All right.
Well, still,
I don't really know.
By tomorrow, there might be a sixth. I mean,
9,
what he's
10.
doing in defiance of public opinion, like in Israel, may wind up bringing down the government. And not just the government, this entire form of the government. So stay tuned in France. A lot more to go on there.
Well, I never really came to understand this form of government anyway, but it's been around for quite some time. It was mostly we didn't need to. But all right, maybe this time if they start over with the Sixth Republic, maybe I'll know what's going on from the beginning. But it might not be good.
Right.
All right.
So Netanyahu, instead of backing down and calling for, this is the latest from Anshel Pfeffer, instead of backing down and announcing that he's going to do a U-turn and suspend, he wants to see what kind of strength he gets on the street. And he'll decide then what he's going to do.
I see. Well,
people who were briefed just a few hours ago that they understood the legislation would be suspended, he's writing, has now said, Smotrich, that he's one of the far-right ministers, said it must go ahead and is calling for supporters to come to a rally in Jerusalem outside of the Supreme Court. Netanyahu and the far-right want a showdown. That's bad.
Okay. Now we can go to, they're all going to march in the street, and he wants to see what kind of strength he can get. And if you're wondering what you can do to stop it, I guess now it's
now we
time
can
to go
talk about the rally in Waco.
Yes. Oh, okay. We're going to move to there. I'm just going to go over to Israel and try and stop this rally in the streets. Nero, it's 10,000 marbles, please.
Well, it's a bad idea.
Okay.
But, there it is. So here in this country, Trump is trying to push his advantage with Ron DeSantis in the Republican primary by getting all the crazies together and having a rally in Waco on the anniversary of the Branch Davidian fiasco, saying that it has nothing to do with the fact that it's the anniversary of the Branch Davidian fiasco, wink, 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 which is an anti-government protest movement that helped spark the Oklahoma City bombing. I mean, it's a big deal that this happened in Waco, and the symbolism is not lost on his side, even if normies don't quite get it. And he has this rally where he has January 6th playing in the background, singing a patriotic song sung by January 6th detainees
Hell,
with his hand on his heart, not the national anthem.
Oh. So they have their own, January 6th Uber Alles going on. Their own new anthem.
Yes, exactly right.
Wow.
So
Seems
Netanyahu and Trump, birds of a feather. I mean, this is like happening right now. Shelby Talcott has a piece in Semaphore. Donald Trump is still winning by being Donald Trump. Waco, Texas. Donald Trump's first major rally on Saturday since launching his third presidential campaign was everything his Republican critics had once claimed would be his undoing.
No.
Trump's made some adjustments, including a new slate of campaign promises tied to the post-presidency culture wars that rivals like Ron DeSantis have focused on. But in general, he's leaning harder than ever into the cult of personality that his foes hoped had run its course with voters, and so far it's working. Before even speaking, he opened with a recording of a song in support of jailed January 6 participants, Justice for All, as he and some in the crowd stood with hands over their hearts. He's calling for new protests and warning of potential death and destruction if he's indicted in one of 4 active criminal investigations, one of which, by the way, might even indict him today. We'll see. His opener, Texas Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, had to clarify that the choice of Waco was not tied to the 30th anniversary of the deadly siege. It later served as a rallying cry for anti-government extremists like Tim McVeigh. Another warm-up act, Ted Nugent, called Zelensky a homosexual weirdo, further illustrating the gulf between DeSantis and Trump, whose supporters have no expectation of unifying the party. And that's the thing. Trump is always going to have the advantage over DeSantis because Trump is a sociopath who really doesn't care who he hurts on the way, including the party.
Okay. So
DeSantis is trying to
that's not an advantage. Really.
Be okay with MAGA while still attracting the larger part of the party, which is whatever. The whatever Republicans are probably 50 to 60% of the party. The hardcore MAGAs are about 30. And the never-Trumpers are everybody else. And DeSantis is trying to attract from everywhere, and of course it's not working. He can't get the MAGA people. And what he's doing in Florida is repelling both the never-Trumpers and the whatevers.
Well, okay. Yeah, he still has to sort of figure out how he can walk the tightrope with the MAGA types, and it's difficult to even think of it as Trump being at an advantage by being crazier. But I mean, if they're looking for crazy votes, I guess that is an advantage. Okay, we'll be right back. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I'm still tinkering with the volume balances here. I think everybody hears you loud and clear. Felt like the music was just a little louder than usual, breaking in on you there, Greg. So apologies if that's the case.
Oh, I like the music.
Okay.
Kind of has a beat to it, you know?
Yeah, I mean, now it's second nature for everybody. Everybody knows that. Wonder if we should. Well, if we change the music, I'll lose track of when to come back.
Yeah. Well, you'd think I'd know with all of that music and stuff what moment I should stop speaking during the break before we come back, but that's half the fun of the show.
Right. I can't stop now. Yes, we'll be cut off.
What half thing is he going to say now?
The podcast listeners always get the benefit of hearing that. I edit things and back it up a little bit so that it comes out in time for them to hear. So that's the advantage of podcast listening. But then you have to wait until 3 o'clock in the afternoon sometimes.
You mean I can't hide behind the break? I didn't know that.
Sometimes. There are occasions where we say, all right, well, if you heard what we said during the break, you will.
Well, that's what I'm thinking. Anyway.
Yeah.
This is more on Shelby Talcott. Trump's vulnerabilities are real, but the thousands who attended his rally in Waco also illustrated his strengths. He has a large base of supporters who see his personal struggles as proof he's the only one for the job. So far, neither DeSantis nor any other Republican has shown they can attack Trump and count on the same support. The former president can rely on his allies to try and bully DeSantis into defending him from an indictment, even as he faces little visible pushback for trashing DeSantis with gay baiting and innuendo at the same time. Yes. It's interesting, though, people who were at the rally, several of them pointed out that they were noisy when Trump was talking about himself, and then when he started bashing DeSantis, they got really quiet. They really don't like when DeSantis and Trump yell at each other.
Mom, Dad, stop.
Pretty much.
I guess.
They want to win, and they're afraid that if they take that too far, they're going to hurt their chances of winning, which, by the way, is going to happen, and which, by the way, is true, that that split is going to hurt their chances of winning. Yeah.
Oh, I know. And they may have in mind, I mean, they're not particularly forward-thinking, cautious people, but occasionally it must occur to them. DeSantis, I don't know what's going to happen in the world, and DeSantis could end up with the nomination. Trump could could fall ill, could die, could decide he doesn't want to be president anymore, could get indicted, any number of things. DeSantis could end up as the nominee for president and possibly win the presidency, and he's extraordinarily petty and vindictive and dangerous. And maybe if I'm at a rally, I'm photographed at a rally by a drone or I don't know what, cheering the denigration of DeSantis, even though it was by Trump and supposedly was okay at the time, I don't know where I'm going to end up. But I don't think they're really thinking
I don't know which camp I'm going to end up in.
But they must be.
Still, attendees were mostly not feeling the same level of vitriol against the Florida governor as Trump is beginning to dish out. NBC noted that Trump's DeSantis attacks at the rally, which received a muted response from the crowd, were softer than his private comments to reporters on the plane. Oh. Many still see DeSantis as someone who could successfully run in the future or even run with Trump. I wish they would stop attacking each other. 44-year-old Chris Blunt, a retired military member and industrial electrician, said, if DeSantis and him get together, we could have 12 years in this country of just some awesomeness, he said.
All right. I mean, maybe if they were all locked up for 12 years, there could be awesomeness. They'd do together for 12.
So the media went nuts over a couple of national Monmouth polls showing Trump ahead. But polls of Iowa and New Hampshire look much different. Public opinion strategy showed DeSantis ahead of Trump by 8 points in Iowa and tied in New Hampshire in a head-to-head matchup, which is silly because there's more than just the two of them running. You don't get a head-to-head matchup in Iowa and New Hampshire. Maybe you do later on, like Ted Cruz got eventually. But in the beginning, it's 1 against 15.
Yeah.
And in those, Trump is tied in Iowa and losing in New Hampshire. So, it's a little bit of distortion to suggest that. But the point is, it's still a fluid situation. Nobody knows quite what's going on in terms of who's going to win, and that's fine. It's way too early for that. But I came across the article that explains it all, finally, that I've been looking for. At last. It's in Politico.
Politico, okay.
And it's an interview by Michael Cruz, who's interviewing someone who wrote a book about wrestling and Vince McMahon. And the title of the article is How Pro Wrestling Explains Today's GOP. The battle between DeSantis and Trump could split the party with surprising results, argues the author of a new book on Vince McMahon.
All right. Vince.
Yeah.
Not his wife.
Now, this is first and foremost a reported biography of the former World Wrestling Entertainment CEO, embedded, though, within Abraham Josephine Reisman's more than 400 pages, based on more than 150 interviews, is an analysis of the roots of today's twisted political climate. Wrestling, writes Reisman, has metastasized into the broader world, especially since the inauguration of the 45th president. There's little difference between Trumpism and Vince's neo-Kayfabe, each with their infinite and indistinguishable layers of irony and sincerity. Each philosophy approaches life with one goal: remake reality in such a way as to defeat one's enemies and sate one's insecurities.
Okay.
Perhaps more apropos, Reisman offers a fresh way to consider current dramas.
Okay.
You have to think of it in terms of roles, heroes and villains, or in industry lingo, faces and heels. Face is short for babyface.
I see. Okay.
The baby faces are the heroes. When I was a kid watching pro wrestling, which was entertainment, Bruno Sammartino, the Italian strong boy, was the winner and always won. He was a face.
Okay. And boy,
the
what a
heel
face.
was the manager, Wild Red Berry, whose stable of mooks and schlemiels would lose to Bruno Sammartino, and Wild Red Berry would get really mad about it, jump in the ring with his cane — he was an elderly gentleman — and try to beat Bruno Sammartino on the head with his cane.
All right.
So he was the heel.
That's the rule. The role, rather. Yes, okay.
That was
Got
the
it.
role. So the fluidity of such positioning within the twists and turns of storylines that can see some similar combatants give rise to new contestants and surprising results. And so in wrestling, what happens sometimes is that they change roles, and this is important. Hulk Hogan is the hero. He's the face. You know, he's the star. He's the champ.
Yeah, sure. Back in whenever, right?
But when Vince McMahon inherited this whole Carney-style kayfabe, as it's called, you know, it's fake, wink, wink. We all know it's fake, but, you know, you have to pretend it's real.
Yes.
And then Vince McMahon started to get even more outrageous and started to do more outrageous things with the wrestlers, and it became harder to even sustain the pretense that it was real.
Okay.
So now you get to the point where it's fake, we know it's fake, and we glorify the fact that it's fake. And that's what they mean by neo-kayfabe.
I see.
Right? So we know Trump is lying. He's not even pretending that he's not lying. You don't have to suspend belief and treat him like a normal candidate. The press is treating Trump like kayfabe. Like, you know, look, it's not real, but wink, wink, we have to pretend it is. But MAGA is treating Trump like neo-kayfabe. It's fake. We know it's fake. We don't care it's fake. You can't tell us it's fake and somehow we're going to be surprised. We already know that. That's why we love it.
Yeah, okay, interesting.
And the concept of
Sometimes.
a heel, Trump is the apex heel, and Ron DeSantis can't keep up with this, is that it does no good whatsoever to point out that he's a bad guy. That's why he has fans. That's why they love him.
Yes.
So you're not exposing anything and changing anybody's mind by saying, look, he might really have committed the crimes that he's being accused of. We know that. He's a heel. We love him because he gets away with it. The problem with an indictment isn't that, oh, this is proof that he did something wrong. Of course, you have to be convicted to prove it. But, you know, the concept is they never would have indicted you if they didn't have enough proof for at least that level of showing that there's probable cause that a crime was committed and so on and so forth. The problem with an indictment is that they love it because he gets away with it. And if you're indicted, you're not getting away with it. And that's the danger for him. Now, another thing that happened in wrestling is back in the day that they set it up so that the Hulk Hogan, instead of just battling heels, actually had a wrestling match against another face. This was a problem because Stone Cold Steve Austin was popular.
Okay.
And
as
Hulk
cold
Hogan
as he was
popular. And so if you have the two good guys face off against each other, who are you supposed to root for?
I don't know.
Crowd's confused. not as popular. It just doesn't have the same feel.
Huh.
And the face always is at a disadvantage to the heel because the heel is going to get the people who want to see him lose and the people who want to see him win. And either way, they're doing great. So they always make a whole lot more money on their wrestling matches.
Oh.
The face is popular because people want to see them win, but they don't want to see him lose, and they don't really care about who they're wrestling against. And so you don't have quite the same level of enthusiasm. People watch Trump. Why is Trump in the news all the time? Because he's a heel. And that means Trump makes news and people retweet and look at him, half of them because they like what he's saying and the other half because they hate him, but he gets the eyeballs either way. Joe Biden's boring.
All right.
He's a face.
Boring.
Yeah. Well, that sound effect I had ready. Anyway.
But it just fits,
I guess so.
You're never going to get
terrible.
the same amount of enthusiasm
Now I'm
for a
back.
face as you are going to be for a heel, because with a heel you get twice as much attention. The people who love you and the people who hate you, and there's nothing in between.
That's incredible. Oh, boy.
It's wrestling.
Well, and it's fine when it's wrestling, and then it's like, well, why don't we govern the country with it? Oh, well, it's not a great idea. Oh, no,
It was
really.
Hogan and Ultimate Warrior booked against each other in 1990 in
Ultimate
WrestleMania
Warrior.
6.
I had no idea. But okay. I mean, I get the message of that one. That one, it's like, oh, that happened? Oh, okay. I'll just take your word for it. The rest of it I kind of remember, right? But by the time WrestleMania was going on, I didn't know what was happening anymore.
You don't have to be an expert on this. You don't have to,
I get the idea. Yeah.
But the idea is, it's really risky to have two good guys go against each other.
Luckily, they don't have that.
Because then what do? I mean, your basic Democratic primary.
Right.
All
right.
Oh, I like this one. I like that
Right,
one.
right.
Well, who are you rooting for? Well, don't make me pick.
Yeah, and I always say
don't
this.
put me
I don't
in the camp
like
of
these.
if I like this one, I hate the other one. I hate that.
Yeah, it's a big turnoff for me, and I don't like
It's right,
participating
because you
in
like the faces.
Yeah.
Okay, but if you were into the heels,
All right.
you wouldn't think that way. Either way,
The fight's okay. Right. And here I had been describing the Republican primary as the Willy Wonka factory tour, but it was in fact
it's the all-heel
wrestling.
tour.
Yeah. There's no Charlie. But it's fun to watch anyway, watch all the other kids fall down the garbage chute and get sucked up into the chocolate. That's hilarious.
So Josie Reisman is reviewing what happened with Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior. Let me put it this
good,
way.
all right.
Hogan
Let's
and
find out.
Warrior, the two faces who matched up against each other, right after that, both of them, their careers tanked. That match was the last gap of the old era, and you can argue it was because it broke the system. Fans had to pick a side. You can't cheer for both guys. You have to cheer for one, and that means somebody's going to lose. Somebody's going to get written out of the story. Somebody has to look bad. And that kind of confusion, she writes, wait, I don't know who to pick. And once I pick, does that mean I have to hate the other guy? It can be thrilling initially, but it can also be something that's damaging to the brands. And Chris says, well, that's interesting. And Reisman says, I'm just saying. And Chris says, well, is this how Nikki Haley becomes president?
Oh, I doubt
My God, it's
any
Nikki
sort of-
Haley with the steel chair, Reisman says. Look, the whole point is that it's going to be very difficult for DeSantis and Trump, whoever emerges victorious, probably Trump because he has some huge advantages over DeSantis, who's just awful. It's going to damage them. The fact that they're fighting with each other, you can already see it at the rallies and the response of people, the mutedness when Trump goes after DeSantis. It's just going to hurt them. And so just how do we know that? Because pro wrestling. Because Hulk Hogan and Ultimate Warrior. That's how we know.
Okay. Man. That's a lot to take in. But okay, I mean, I've heard
You're saying that a lot after my segments.
this is a big one. This is, we've heard
I
the
actually
pro
thought
wrestling.
that was one of the best stories I've read. One of
It's
the best
pretty
pieces
good.
I've read in a long time.
Interesting. I mean, I've definitely heard the comparison to professional wrestling before, and it's made a certain amount of sense. Like, it's not real, and some people don't care that it's not real, but yet some people are insistent that it is real, and I don't know. We're back in Israel.
Israel's another story.
Yeah, right. I knew we would get back to that eventually, but yeah, but this is a lot more in-depth explanation of the dynamics, and an interesting idea that there's a thing you can do to wreck wrestling, and it's happened and it's been done, and that it could actually explain what might happen in politics, as opposed to just saying, well, it's a funny comparison. Now, same dynamics, and it really does. They control both politics and wrestling. That's crazy. Oh no. All right. Wow. So interesting on a number of levels. I'll have to read all the way through
breaking news from Israel. The Tel Aviv Stock Exchange is joining the general strike.
Oh, well.
The Stock Exchange, otherwise known as left-wing anarchist terrorist, Noga Tarnopolsky reports.
Okay, yeah. Sure. Yeah, right. So it's not lefties and malcontents necessarily, just the only ones.
Exactly.
Okay,
and meanwhile, she reports it now seems likely that Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, fired by Netanyahu yesterday, which is one of the things that sparked the huge protest today, will be unfired. Oh. It's a second public humiliation for National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, who's, by the way, the most right-wing nutcase of all of them, who was forced to unfire Tel Aviv Police Commander Ami Eshed about 10 minutes ago.
I don't even know. Oh, yeah. All right. Fired,
right.
unfired,
I mean, this is
forget it.
Let's just say this is a fluid situation. Nobody really knows what Netanyahu's going to do. And on the one hand, it sounds like he's wanting to show a force. But whether that's just to save face or whether to force a January 6th sort of situation is unknown. On the other hand, reports are coming out that, he really is backing off in a number of ways. And the right-wingers in his cabinet are not happy about it. So more to come on that. Just thought I'd throw that in.
All right. We'll have to keep an eye on it. There's no telling where this ends up. This is very fractious, and I've seen a lot of the members of the Likud party head in the other direction in the last couple of days. It's going to be interesting.
Yep.
I think I'm glad I don't live there.
Anyway.
Okay.
So back to the U.S. So, again, Trump, I said, has the advantage over Netanyahu, right? Over Ron DeSantis at the moment. This is a Talking Points memo editorial report. All reporters agree DeSantis is toast.
Oh. Hey, all right.
NBC just moved the story. He wrote a couple of days ago, Ron DeSantis' donors and allies question if he's ready for 2024, and sort of sums up a lot of the stuff people are writing about how DeSantis isn't the hot topic. And in fact, over at the Bulwark, Tim Miller had a whole podcast about Ron DeSantis is Scott Walker. So if you want to start calling him Governor Scott Walker of Florida, that's fine.
Yeah,
it gets the point across.
Okay. If he starts tweeting about bologna sandwiches,
this is in the Daily Beast. Ron DeSantis' book tour looks like amateur hour. The Florida governor's soft launch for a likely presidential campaign lost its top event coordinator, and some Republicans are saying his armor is already starting to crack. It's giving you an idea of the reports that are sort of showing up here. This is Esquire, and this time it's not Charlie Pierce, it's Jeff Vandermeer. Ron DeSantis is a man of no qualities. As Ron DeSantis provides safe harbor for oppression in Florida and exports bad policy across the country, Make America Florida Again is his slogan. It's clear that he represents an existential threat to American democracy, even if he fails to become president. Just like destructive Republican governors before him feathered the nest for DeSantis' success by destroying safeguards and institutions, making it possible for DeSantis to become more predatory and authoritarian, Trump has set the table for DeSantis at the national level. Trump's coalition of white nationalists, conspiracy theorists, disgruntled right-wing journalists, and evangelicals now becomes how DeSantis, who otherwise might be unelectable, can see a path to the White House. With DeSantis' explicit approval, the Republican-led Florida legislature has stamped out as much home rule as possible, continuing Rick Scott's legacy, and rendered cities and counties less able to govern effectively. This helps the special interests that fuel DeSantis' campaigns but does nothing for ordinary citizens. If you're just in Florida and struggling, for example, with how to insure your home from climate issues,
loser.
Good luck with you.
Yeah.
DeSantis' unchecked power in the state is reflected in his ability to bully the same legislator into a redistricting that removed traditionally black voting blocks, despite the legislator preferring a more moderate plan, that he worked with national operatives to push the effort to completion, hints at the networks DeSantis already has access to, even before formally announcing a run for president. And where Scott, an austerity Republican, had not already retired to remove competency within state agencies during purges, DeSantis has continued to politicize as many positions as possible. We know what he's doing with the schools. Removing vital experience from state agencies is a feature, not a bug. DeSantis has made many of those institutions much less transparent and accountable to Floridians, but he's also crossed boundaries Scott only dreamed of breaching, including a shameless streak of political pay-to-play. October 22nd, Tampa Bay Times article revealed that since assuming office in 2019, DeSantis has accepted roughly $3.3 million in campaign donations from 250 people he selected for leadership roles. 75% increase in the number of donors appointed over Scott's first term in office. So, DeSantis made Florida into a horrible state, which, still is paying the price, COVID deaths, etc. Much worse still, says the article, in terms of disaster, DeSantis has already politicized the pandemic. COVID broke communities in Florida, even if some still do not know they were broken or how broken. It left communities to fend for itself, even in counties that tried to provide decent messaging, all while people we love died or got sick and died. Into those horrors, DeSantis inserted a counterfactual surgeon general who didn't believe in massive vaccines and punished businesses and school boards that tried to follow the facts. The statewide communication failure and full-on disinformation campaign arguably increased death and suffering, culminating in DeSantis' call to establish a COVID jury to help justify his decisions. He used his messaging and proxies messaging not just to push a political agenda rather than a public health agenda, but to break down political resistance at the same time. DeSantis, in part, built his political machine on making Florida sicker.
Thanks, Yale.
Yeah. So the business of state, for which DeSantis is often the business of his own personal politics, will continue. His 15-week abortion ban may become more restrictive. In addition to a brutal campaign of suppression of queer identity, DeSantis has supported his crusade against critical race theory by trying to destroy New College. That's the college that he took over the board of. Even his professors quit rather than subject themselves to censorship. And he may be less flamboyant than Trump, but he supports a style and substance of governance just as inflammatory, making the case, and this is the argument here, who's worse, Trump or DeSantis? And the answer is yes.
Yeah, right. Both terrible in their own ways and intent on making each other worse.
Yeah, DeSantis is terrible in a quiet, competent sort of way, and Trump is terrible in an overt threat of violence sort of way. So pick your poison.
Yeah, and I guess they're sort of complementary, right, in the way that Trump's rhetoric clears the way for DeSantis to do these things in reality. By the time, if it was just DeSantis doing these things, people would say, this guy's an insane dictator, get rid of him.
Yeah, but compared to Trump, he's a moderate.
Right, but Trump just threatens all the things, and everybody says, don't worry about it, it's just rhetoric. And meanwhile, while paying attention to the rhetoric, this guy down in Florida is doing it. And everybody says, yeah, but he doesn't have the charisma to do the rhetoric. Well, so what? What? But he's doing the thing.
Right. Tim Naftali in The Atlantic writes, indicting a former president should always have been fair game.
Well, yeah.
If a grand jury does indict Trump, it'll finally confirm, as the founders expected, that ordinary citizens have the power to treat former commanders-in-chief like anyone else.
That was the idea.
So that is the idea. And the fact that we didn't do it, set up the whole, well, you can't, or maybe we should, or whatever.
Yeah.
Back in the day. Yeah, well, I just don't think it would be good for the country to have a former president dumped in the D.C. jail, Nixon told the vice presidential nominee Nelson Rockefeller, August 24th, 1974. Nixon accepted that as a former president, he could be indicted, but he had his lawyer argue against indictment on the basis that a fair trial would be impossible. A violation of Nixon's Sixth Amendment rights to an impartial jury. And Leon Jaworski agreed.
Oh, yes.
I knew in my own mind that if an indictment were returned and the court asked me if I believed Nixon could be received a prompt, fair trial, I would have to answer no.
Yeah.
Jaworski hoped Nixon's successor, Ford, would take the decision out of his hands. After Ford revealed at his first press conference that he was considering pardoning Nixon, Jaworski told his top lieutenants, "I wouldn't ask the grand jury to indict Nixon if President Ford intended to pardon him."
Yes, right. Okay.
And Ford didn't want to wait for an indictment, so that helped Jaworski.
Okay. Got him out of trying to decide, I guess.
Right. There'll be a lot of discussion in the coming days about the political utility for Trump and political price, perhaps for his detractors, of Trump's indictment for a felonious scheme in New York City. But taking the long view, it's about time our country set this precedent. Good government requires a little fear among the powerful, including presidents. Presidents especially need to know if they engage in criminal acts, their power cannot protect them forever.
Yeah, I mean,
a lesson Netanyahu has to learn, and Trump will never learn because it's not his makeup.
Yeah,
that's factual and logical, and that's not how he works.
Yeah, right. That's true, and he never believed that was the case anyway. But the rest of us were all told, "Oh yeah, power can't protect you forever." And even when, we were always told, "No one's above the law." All right, well, actually, the president is above the law. And then it was like, well, just the sitting president is above the law. And then I guess we all came to accept that. And then it was like, okay, he's lost his seat. Can we do it now? He's still sitting down in a chair, so he can't. No.
For the record, Tim Natali is a clinical associate professor of history and of public service at NYU, who's the first director of the Richard Nixon Presidential Library and Museum. So if you're wondering what he knows about Nixon, he knows a lot.
I guess quite a bit. But clinical, I've never heard that. Okay. Did I hear that right? Clinical professor of history?
Yeah, it's usually in medical schools.
Yeah, like we're having a
clinical
history
associate
clinic.
Professor of history and of public service. But notice for the record, he's not a forensic associate professor.
We take walk-in people who have clinical problems with history.
Yeah.
Like, okay. And instead, first thing you walk into a clinic, they take your history. This clinic, you walk in, they give you one.
Yeah, exactly.
That's incredible.
Should a group of New York grand jurors soon decide, he says, that the indictment of Trump is absolutely necessary, they will finally confirm, as the founders expected, that ordinary citizens have the power to treat former commanders-in-chief like anyone else, and that's something that should always have been an American tradition. And again, add that to the list of why it's okay that Trump gets indicted in New York, even though it may not be the, quote, strongest, end quote, case, meaning legally.
Mm-hmm.
It may not be the strongest case. David French made the case today that the problem with the New York case, and we don't know this yet because we don't know what Bragg is going to do, and we don't know what he's going to say, and we don't know what he's thinking. But it's clear that there's a misdemeanor involved with lying about business records.
Okay, at least.
Because he paid Stormy Daniels claiming it was a business expense, and it wasn't.
Yeah, you can't do that.
By the way, there's a 2-year expiration of that.
Oh. All right, although maybe some of his delays and delaying tactics would help toll the statute or convince a judge to stretch things out.
Well, but the other side of the coin is that if you can link it to an actual crime, there's a 5-year statute.
Okay.
And the question on the table is, what's that crime?
Okay.
And that's why David French says, without knowing what the link is, it's a weak case, but maybe we'll find out something else, like obstruction or intimidation. Maybe it's stronger. We don't know. We'll see.
Okay. All right. Well, it's about time. And, if you can't indict a former president, then you'd have to take the Romanian example. And you don't want that. Right. Sure. This is the most indictable guy ever. All right. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Net Roots Radio. Net Roots Radio. It's a great radio. I don't know. I'm doing the Mario Luigi thing all of a sudden. And we're back. Okay. So what's happening? I put aside, I had put aside a couple of news reports about what was going on in Israel, but then Greg covered it pretty well, and we found out that everything is kind of changing by the minute, including, like I said, I had put aside an article. I knew I had seen somewhere, hey, Greg, wasn't the defense minister actually fired? And the answer, of course, is yes, and also no. The reason I had thought he was fired was that the BBC piece that I had put aside was mass Israel protests after Netanyahu fires defense minister. But now I realize that the answer is both yes and no, because apparently people are being unfired, maybe even for the purpose of refiring them later. I don't know. that is a very, look, Israel was a complex situation to begin with. Now it's even worse in terms of its complexity because we don't know what the news actually is. And that's never good when you're trying to understand things. What actually happened here? I don't know. I'm not sure. It might all be for show. It might be, people may be fired, maybe might unfired. I don't know. So that's not so good. So there we're definitely going to have to wait and see. And even when we see, we might not really truly see what's going on here. All right, let's see. Other things to share with you. One, I like this. A reminder of a story that we have already covered. But that is some wacky looking display in Pocket. I got the glitch TV version of what's happening in this New York article. Will it show me the whole thing? Yes. We just by way of update, I bring you this just to let you know that it's still going on successfully. Lots of people now covering the stories. We don't originate the stories here on the show, but we enjoy when we bring you a story early on that then becomes an even bigger story and even more outlets cover it over the following couple of days, which just kind of goes to show, hey, good, we have good news eye here. Our listeners are interested in the right kinds of things. These things become news. And if I have trained myself to spot good things for you to see because you guys respond positively to hearing these stories ahead of time. Anyway, back to... if I could just tell you the news story and what it is, then you would know what I'm talking about. This New York Magazine piece, How a Single Democrat Stopped the Anti-Trans Wave. And I think that might be a little premature to say they've actually stopped the whole thing. But in their state, they have at least held the wave back. And I guess this is also being offered as a model for how you might be able to stop the wave elsewhere. We're talking, of course, about the Nebraska State Senator Michaela Cavanaugh, whose name has come up on the show twice now. Once with our original discovery of someone else's story of how Michaela Cavanaugh was filibustering literally everything in the Nebraska legislative session in order to stop the offering of the anti-trans bills being offered there in Nebraska. And then we revisited the story a little while later to say, yeah, it's still going on, and now it is still going on. But this offers another chance, one, to remind you of what she's doing, bring you up to date with the success she's had with it, and I guess encourage other people to do the same. And I don't think you can report on her efforts too often, given, what's at stake and how courageously she's acting here. So let's go take a look at what's going on here. Matt Steib reporting this for New York Magazine. Sometimes I'm not really in the zone, but sometimes I can riff for hours without thinking about it. It's not just me. It's also Nebraska State Senator Michaela Cavanaugh describing her flow state while filibustering. For the past 3 weeks, the Democrat has engaged in an unusual filibuster to stop the passage of a Republican bill that would deny gender-affirming care to transgender youth. Most filibusters involve a politician stalling for hours to block the advancement of a single bill, but to kill the bill known as LB 574, Kavanaugh has filibustered every bill that has come up for debate this session. I'm frustrated, Kavanaugh said of her many 8-hour filibuster sessions. Everyone is frustrated, and that is the intention. To aggravate, to get people to stand up and think about what we're doing and adjust the trajectory that we're on as a state. As other Republican-controlled legislators advance laws restricting transgender rights and access to care, Democrats in the minority in Nebraska are in a position to take a stand thanks to the state's unique unicameral legislature. 33 votes are needed to bypass a filibuster in the state Senate, but the Republican majority is 1 vote shy of that threshold. That's pretty close. Meaning that Kavanaugh could theoretically keep up the filibuster indefinitely, assuming no Democrats peel off to kill her effort. I will burn this session to the ground over this bill, she said to colleagues in February. We reported as much. If LB 574 does manage to pass the legislature, Republican Governor Jim Pillen has said he will sign it into law. After 3 weeks of filibustering, including speeches ranging from trans rights, which is what the issue at hand really is, to the plot of Madagascar, which is, I think, extraneous, Kavanaugh eased up on Thursday to allow for cloture of a bill. Cloture vote on a bill. Oh, this is so she let one go. That would end her filibuster to see who among her colleagues was willing to legislate hate against children. At the time, the Republican majority was still one vote short of advancing the bill until a Democrat, Mike McDonnell, jumped across the aisle to vote to begin debate. When asked if she had spoken to McDonnell since the vote, Kavanaugh answered with a curt no. But with Nebraska law requiring 2 more rounds of debate before a final vote on any bill, Kavanaugh said she remains steadfast. I am keeping up my filibuster on every single bill moving forward, she reaffirmed on Friday. With Republicans in control of the legislature and Democrats unlikely to pass many of their own bills, Kavanaugh's protests also blocks other anti-trans legislation, including an effective ban on transgender students from playing high school sports of their choice, a ban on minors attending drag shows, and a measure allowing medical practitioners to refuse care on a religious basis. Republicans are also pursuing a 6-week abortion ban. Again, I want to reiterate my objection to conflating transgender issues with drag, and I don't think they're the same thing, but most people are either not going to fight or not interested or simply willing to say, well, it comes under the umbrella of LGBTQ, everything else and every other letter, and we'll throw them in there, but nobody has put the D in there yet, and they're not likely to, and they're different issues, and there's nuance, but never mind all of that. The more important story here, I think, is the filibuster. As the filibuster gains national attention, Kavanaugh has picked up several allies in her campaign to grind the Nebraska Senate to a halt. State Senator Megan Hunt, whose son is transgender, gave a speech Wednesday accusing the state Republicans of bowing to the party's national agenda. This is all of you playing government, she said. Okay. Hunt also noted that care for transgender minors is already difficult to access and that her own son is not on puberty blockers or hormone treatments despite his repeated attempts. You know why? Because Medicaid denied it 4 times. As of Friday, 4 of the 17 Democratic senators promised to block all legislation during the 90-day session, which is more than half over. Facing a rare show of, you know what, before I even continue on with this, I guess let me just offer the thought that we ought to classify this sort of extreme filibuster, the filibustering of every bill, and the team so far more or less sticking together and saying, yeah, there's just going to be no legislating. This is a little like the Nebraska state legislature going on strike, along with the people in France, now in Germany, also in Israel and elsewhere. And interesting that people are being pushed to extremes like this by the fact that there's another side in politics pushing extremes. And when they push extremes, other people feel pushed to extremes. And this is the result. Just think about it in those terms. All right, where were we? Let's see. Yes, right. Facing a rare show of true Democratic hardball, Republicans have made an effort to dilute the bill. This is the interesting part, I thought, about, well, how will this all shake out? Could it just be nothing gets done, or do they bend a little bit? And it looks like they're trying to bend. Will it be enough? We'll have to see. We hope not. I hope that they aren't able to pass any of it. But this is the logical response, which is interesting to see that they're actually following logical lines here. Facing a rare show of true Democratic hardball, Republicans have made an effort to dilute the bill, working on an amendment that would not restrict access to puberty blockers to minors. But Kavanaugh refuses to budge on that front either, saying that she won't let her GOP colleagues vote for a watered-down version of transphobia. So that's some stance there. I hope legislators across the country who are in a similar position realize that this is a significant moment in time and in our history, she said. We are seeing legislatures attacking, targeting, dehumanizing, and demoralizing a specific population of people. If we don't stand in the way, we may as well be joining the attack. So that's an interesting thing. The logical response for the Republicans is try to water it down. And they're probably thinking, well, if we water it down a little bit, we might get, remember, we're pretty close to being able to just stop her filibuster by shutting her down. We're one vote shy on that. Can we get one conservative Democrat, and it is Nebraska, we should be able to find one conservative Democrat who will say, well, okay, the watered down version, I think, should go forward. I will vote the other way to stop her filibuster. And that might be all that it takes. But interestingly, well, she's not going to facilitate it. She's saying, listen, this is a matter of principle. And it's true. I mean, she's rightly pointing out that legislators across the country, in legislatures across the country, are saying that, they're acting counter to the flow of history here. And this is not the first time, I guess, but it's one of a couple of instances where they're being asked anyway to restrict, to roll back rights and recognition of rights for a specific group of people that have been scapegoated for very bad reasons. And it's worth pointing out. Speaking of which, I knew I had put something away on this one. And do I have something else on this person? I know we've mentioned this person before, and maybe that was all that was necessary, was to mention them, and I didn't save the article. But I may have, I know we've mentioned to you at some point in the past, someone who gets their own profile here in Rolling Stone, which it's not super long, I don't think. Let's see. How's the pocket version? It's lengthy, but let's bring it to your attention. As I said, when we're talking about targeting specific groups of people and trampling on their rights, and why are Republicans interested in doing that, here's some explanation about the whys and wherefores of it. And I guess you could look at it in the pro wrestling context as well. This is, of course, the story of the loneliest drag queen in America. Who could that possibly be? Perhaps you remember we spoke the other day about Lady Maga, not Lady Gaga, but Lady Maga, whose idea, I guess, originally was that this person was going to be I don't know what pronouns Lady Maga likes to use, to just, add, as she said, some sparkle to the conservative movement. But the whole thing backfired because they didn't see the anti-trans panic spreading to anti-drag, even though, again, they're different things. But to most of MAGA, what do you mean they're different things? Take a look. And, well, there's different thought and meaning behind the mode of dress here. But you're never going to get that. Here it is, though. Tim Dickinson, writing for Rolling Stone, one of their top writers there, the loneliest drag queen in America, Lady Maga wanted to bring, quote, sparkle to the conservative movement. Then the anti-trans panic set in. And, hey, wrong place, wrong time. But MAGA world is always the wrong place, and it's never the right time to be a part of it. It's hard out there for a right-wing drag queen. The piece starts, when a 6'2", 190-pound man entered the Gaylord National Resort and Convention Center outside Washington, D.C. Yeah, it's the Gaylord National Resort and Convention Center. What are you laughing at? Decked out in a fabulous blonde wig, a crown of flowers, and a floor-length red, white, and blue dress, he was not there to protest the Conservative Political Action Conference. And again here, just before we get actually into the story, a reminder, this is the point I've been trying to make about the nuance and the difference between drag and trans. Like, if it was a trans person and they were wearing women's clothing because they wanted to be identified as a woman, they would take offense at having the story read that when the 6'2" 190 pound man entered the Gaylord National Resort, and that he was not there to protest CPAC. If it was a trans person, if they were the same trans people and drag queens, and they were after the same ends and did the same things for the same purpose, then they would say, no, I identify as a woman. But drag is different. They identify as men. They just enjoy dressing as women, and not everyday women, but over the top, exaggerated. It's just a different thing. But you're never going to get people to appreciate the nuance and difference. Their ability to appreciate nuance ends at scorning Ford F-150 Lightnings because they're electric vehicles, not pickup trucks. After that, their ability to discern nuance and pick up on it and understand it ends, I think. So this kind of nuance, not for them. All right, back to the story. Our protagonist here, Lady MAGA, not there to protest CPAC. Like you might have seen the showing up at this point in drag with the Lady MAGA thing. You might have thought that they were there as a satirical protester, but no. A blue sash proclaimed the name of Ryan Woods' drag persona in sparkly letters, Lady MAGA USA. The floor-length ensemble, he'd explained, was an homage to, and this is a weird group of people to pay homage to, and I think person number one might object to being thrown in with the others, Abigail Adams, sure, fine, great, Marie Antoinette, no, don't pay homage to Marie Antoinette, and Scarlett O'Hara, also, no, really just don't, but Abigail Adams probably would be like, if you want to pay homage to me, don't put me in with Marie Antoinette and Scarlett O'Hara. Anyway, the dress was festooned with yellow ribbons honoring the, quote, political prisoners of January 6th. What was Lady MAGA's mission? To publicly show that anyone can be a patriot and to trigger the radical left. And so they, amazingly enough, maybe this is part of the reason why he's one of the loneliest drag queens in America. He's there to trigger the left. And, one, that's not nice. And two, it's not working because at CPAC, Lady MAGA's arrival triggered Woods' fellow travelers on the right. Matt Walsh, this is totally unsurprising, right? Matt Walsh, perhaps the loudest anti-trans voice in the conservative movement, tweeted a photo of the drag queen, writing, "Absolute embarrassment. You are not conservative if you are fighting to conserve perversion." A Groyper, one of the followers of white nationalist America First leader Nick Fuentes, later accosted Lady MAGA at dinner as using one of the currently unacceptable and maybe always was unacceptable F word for gay individuals. I think you can all imagine, and they spell it out here with a dash in place of the first vowel in the word. I don't know if that's supposed to be the new way of writing. Anyway, the bitter truth of modern conservatism is that nothing bonds the movement like a scapegoat. Just sort of throwing it back to the pro wrestling thing, and that's how I made the transition to this story. I was like, well, yeah, why are they targeting trans youth in these bills across the country in different Republican-controlled legislatures? And the answer is nothing bonds the movement like a scapegoat. The rocket rise of MAGA was fueled by a shared disgust of immigrants, Mexicans and Muslims. I put them both together in one word, the Mexlims, I guess, and they don't belong together in the same word. Immigrants, Mexicans, and Muslims. These days, what unites the right, and using that phrase advisedly in the wake of Charlottesville, is an unhinged crusade against the trans community and also drag performers who are baselessly accused of being pedos that, quote, groom children into, quote, gender confusion. Red state legislatures across America are now blitzing to pass laws, and it's interesting, blitzing to pass, bad sports metaphors there, but blitzing to pass laws that criminalize public drag performance or outlaw gender-affirming medical treatment for trans youth, or both, as is the case in Nebraska, and really I think almost everywhere where they're entertaining these ideas. During CPAC itself, the demagoguery against gender nonconformity, and that's the bigger umbrella really, was thunderous. In the event's biggest speech, Michael Knowles, it's Knowles, a media personality for the Daily Wire, demanded transgenderism be eradicated from public life. Remember that line? Not long ago, a very different future for Lady MAGA and the conservative movement seemed possible. The drag queen, who identifies as a gender-bending gay man, not a trans woman, thank you for including that, has been a breakout hit, or had been a breakout hit on Donald Trump's 2020 campaign circuit. It's like not that long ago. His last actual campaign, this was like, hey, fabulous, everybody take a picture with Lady MAGA. In fact, Knowles himself had posed with his arm around the performer's waist at the Politicon convention in Nashville in late 2019, tweeting out the selfie and proclaiming, "A star is born." I think we actually already have noted that on the show, but it's worth reiterating here. These days, the party's 2024 contenders are competing to be the grand marshal of the anti-queer hate parade. In Florida, Governor Ron DeSantis has embraced crackdowns on drag shows to boost his culture war cred. Oh, by the way, I was just thinking about the old Trumpettes, the people who used to, maybe they still do, hang out at Pervalago, but they're older women who are big MAGA fans. And they dressed, I mean, quite honestly, it's difficult to tell whether, they were just older women who still made themselves up as though they were younger women and poofed their hair out and wore ridiculous sequined dresses, floor-length things. Quite honestly, sometimes it's difficult to tell at first glance the difference between a Lady MAGA drag queen and one of them. And I mean, I guess that's supposed to be the cleverness of drag occasionally. Anyway, I just wanted to point that out there. Take a look at the pictures. Anyway, even Donald Trump, who famously filmed a bit with Rudy Giuliani in drag and invited Caitlyn Jenner to speak at his 2016 nominating convention, has gotten into the act now, vowing during a March stump speech in Iowa to punish public schools for pushing, quote, transgender insanity. The right-wing's boogeyman switcheroo has left its most famous drag star in an untenable position. And naturally, no one actually cares, except the person themselves. And they're all alone in that. Well, we care, but, not very much, because it's like, yeah, you joined MAGA and you got beat up. I don't know what to tell you. Striving to, anyway, so the right-wing's boogeyman switcheroo has left its most famous drag star in an untenable position, striving to promote the GOP, as a big tent for gay conservatives, at a moment when party insiders are crusading against all things queer. Lady MAGA offers a cautionary tale that ideological purity on issues like guns, abortion, and small government, even a willingness to blast the debauchery, quote, debauchery of mainstream LGBTQ culture, isn't enough to carve out a safe space in a party that finds its unity in shared intolerance. Lady MAGA USA the character, was created by Ryan Woods, a gay Utah man, and maybe you want to think about relocating, in his mid-30s, an ex-Mormon, I would assume that they don't go together very well, and former Democrat, that goes better, and yet What can you say? What an iconoclast, that Ryan Woods. Woods has traced his drag queen journey in a first-person podcast, as well as through his website and myriad social media channels. Woods did not respond to requests for interview, did not respond to interview requests, let's say. Woods has centered his identity in sexuality, less in sexuality than in nationalism. And yet, it's not working out. Just because I happen to be gay and love to dress up, he told the right-wing activist Dinesh D'Souza in a 2021 podcast, that has nothing to do with my identity as a patriot and a God-fearing constitutionalist Republican. They're going to have trouble with that one. A former Eagle Scout. How do you like that? Woods grew up totally Mormon, he's said, attending BYU and even serving a mission in France, like Mitt Romney, before coming out at age 22, unlike Romney, and leaving the church, unlike Romney, and later moving to Massachusetts, like Romney. So, I don't know. That's weird. But not terrible. Not terribly difficult to understand. Some things they did similarly and other things they did not. Woods has spoken openly about how his drag journey began in the ICU after a 2016 suicide attempt. Okay, that's pretty serious. I'm a suicide survivor, he told his podcast listeners. I don't hide it. And Woods describes how those dark moments at the hospital made him realize I needed an outlet, a way to express myself where I didn't feel self-conscious and I didn't feel oppressed. Drag offered Woods the platform to sparkle and shine. He began performing in Boston, moving from on amateur nights to paid performances under the stage name Rihanna Woods. That's not a big departure from Ryan Woods, now is it? Preferring fairy tale poise to raunchy kitsch, Woods says, I was known as the Disney Princess of Boston. There are many ways to perform in drag, and I guess that's at least one of them. In 2017, he moved back to Utah, where Woods quickly became a fixture of Salt Lake's drag scene, performing at the Viva La Diva show. What an interesting name. Sounds like fun.
Sup, fam? It's your boy Darwin, aka Darwin_Darko, aka the most reasonable man in America, aka KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. We left off in the middle of the Rolling Stone profile of Lady Maga USA. No, don't forget the USA part. The loneliest drag queen in America, and it must be a lonely place to be. But, finding out some of the detail of it is somewhat enlightening, perhaps, although I really can't. I don't know why you stick with it, but, why does a lone legislator in Nebraska conduct a one-person filibuster of every single bill? Well, I guess standing on principle, and it's interesting occasionally to explore the principles that wouldn't occur to you ordinarily, let's say. All right, so let's see. In 2017, we find out that Ryan Woods here moved back to Utah and found a home in, a Salt Lake City drag scene, which actually exists, or existed at the time. I wonder whether it's still in existence or is struggling now, performing at the Viva La Diva show, where he says he had the honor of being Britney Spears. I guess that he gave that a try in putting together a performance. And he said he's even performed with RuPaul's Drag Race when it came to town. But as he immersed himself in drag culture, Woods found himself again haunted by not living his truth. I felt like I was back in the closet, he said. How so? As a Trump-supporting conservative gay man. That would make things difficult. Triggered by a F Trump poster tacked up in the dressing room of a drag race show, Woods began plotting for ways, quote, to still be a fabulous, sparkly, magical drag queen, but now for the benefit of his right-wing ideals. In August of 2019, Lady MAGA was born. I am a political drag queen, Woods announced. I support President Trump, and I believe that together we can make America great again. Well, that was very funny at the time, but for some reason Ryan had trouble seeing the leopard coming to eat his face. And then what happened? Face got eaten, and he's surprised. Lady MAGA has evolved into a fairly chaste figure. Woods now insists, quote, my agenda is not to sexualize America, rather to uplift patriots with dignity, fun, and smiles. But the character launch was more titillating. Lady MAGA debuted in photos wearing hot pants, a flag print bikini top, and knee-high platform boots. In other busty images, the performer sported an NRA hat and a pistol while wrapped up in an albino python. Well, very flashy at that. The backlash from the liberal drag community was predictable and harsh. Trump, by this point, had unleashed a torrent of anti-LGBTQ policies, including rescinding federal guidance that allowed public school students to use the bathroom of their choice, banning trans Americans from the military, and proposing to roll back medical non-discrimination safeguards for trans patients. How can you support the very person who wants to allow the establishment to discriminate against you? A black queer drag artist known as Wiltavius. How do you like that? That's an interesting one. Wiltavius told the Salt Lake City Weekly. And it's a good question, right? How can you do it? Well, Lady MAGA threw gas on the fiery breakup with far-right talking points. Woods was soon denouncing, quote, the radical LGBT cult, adding, not so sparkly, I hate pride parades. I think they're disgusting. They're about debauchery. Woods made a clarion call to other right-wingers in the queer community. It's time to put down the LGBT Kool-Aid, freshen our makeup, pull up our tight skinny jeans, sprinkle on a little glitter, throw on some heels, flip our hair, and start hashtag coming out conservative. I mean, there's room on the spectrum for that, of course. It might be a lonely place. That's true. Among the Trump faithful at rallies leading up to the 2020 election, Woods insists that Lady MAGA was, quote, welcomed with open arms. Probably true at the time. The performer says he found a niche among MAGA believers who'd been cut off by the LGBTQ people in their lives. They're so heartbroken that their gay friends and family feel they are their enemy, Woods recalled. Touring the country as Lady MAGA, Woods befriended Brandon Straka, S-T-R-A-K-A, founder of the Walk Away movement that encouraged minority groups to decamp from the Democratic Party. He snapped selfies with prominent conservatives ranging from Charlie Kirk to Rick Grenell, and of course with Knowles, as we heard earlier. In February of 2020, Woods even confronted Nick Fuentes on camera, insisting that they agreed on 90% of issues. Fuentes responded to Lady MAGA that his drag getup, quote, activates the disgust in my brain, unquote. When Woods tried to convince Fuentes that he too was against the radical LGBT cult, Fuentes responded, the problem is not the radical LGBT, it's the LGBT period. That's the problem. For a brief moment, It seemed as though Lady MAGA might become the diamond and silk of the drag community, empowered to join the delicious sport of owning the libs. It is the ultimate defiance of the leftist narrative, Woods has said of his act. Nothing makes them more upset than to see a drag queen support our president and be embraced by Trump supporters. Woods fawned on about the open-mindedness of the MAGA set. My personal belief is that modern conservatives are over the gay issue for the most part, while simultaneously distancing himself from mainstream queer culture, calling himself an alpha gay man who abandoned the Democrat plantation of slavery for gay people. Woods talked up, instead reclaiming our right to be good old-fashioned gay men. The honeymoon was short-lived. First, Trump lost the 2020 election. Then, after January 6th, Woods lost his day job as a flight attendant at Delta Airlines. Woods had been in Washington, D.C. on the day of the insurrection. While friends like Stracco were busy storming the halls of Congress, Woods insists that Lady MAGA was performing miles away from the Capitol. In an interview with Dinesh D'Souza, Woods described being suspended by the airline on January 7th for social media photos of Lady MAGA with patriots open carrying their firearms. Woods claimed he was fired for being a drag queen Trump supporter. Delta, in a statement to Rolling Stone, described Woods' allegation as not an accurate or complete explanation of the company's termination decision. The airline added, when Delta employees intermix Delta's brand with conduct or content that does not reflect our values of professionalism, inclusion, and respect, that conduct can result in discipline or termination. Leaning into his political career, Woods soon assumed a post as Utah State Chair of the Log Cabin Republicans, an organization for gay conservatives, as you know. But with Trump exiled from the White House, hardline social conservatives have brought a reactionary energy to the conservative movement, seeking to turn back the clock on not only abortion access, but on woke protections for racial and sexual minorities. The thin strip of territory that Lady MAGA attempted to stake out for cross-dressing conservatives has been swamped by this rising tide of intolerance. Having burned his bridges, foreclosing a return to the mainstream, Woods retreated to higher ground with a movement that's increasingly hostile to his very existence. Lady MAGA has attempted to be a loyal soldier. After the movement went to war with Disney over its supposed wokeness, Woods, who loves to cosplay as Elsa from Frozen, calls Disney the rock that holds my heart together and brands his followers as MAGA-teers, think Mouseketeers, even joined in denouncing Disney's betrayal of the American people for embracing a radical racist anti-American, anti-white agenda. Woods has also used his social media channels to echo the new conservative talking points against erstwhile allies. Gays need to reclaim being just gay, he tweeted last May. We're not LGBTQIAXYZ groomers. Recently, Woods became an, quote, ambassador for Gays Against Groomers, a reactionary group that says it opposes the sexualization and indoctrination of children, as I think we all like to do, which it claims includes drag queen story hours, which it doesn't, the transitioning and medicalization of minors, and gender theory being taught in the classroom. In the wake of the fallout from Lady MAGA's CPAC appearance, Woods attempted to sass his critics, sending Matt Walsh a message in a Facebook Live video, quote, I will make you a badge. I will attach Barbie shoes to it, and it will be pink, he promised, so everyone will know you're the police of the conservative movement. Well, Matt Walsh is gone now, so I guess it must have worked, right? But the right-wing onslaught against gender nonconformance ultimately appears to be pushing Lady MAGA back toward a new closet of sorts. In a March 12th Facebook post, Woods wrote that he is hanging up his identity as a drag queen. I now prefer to call myself a costume artist, he wrote. The drag world was one of the ways I could enjoy my talents, he added, but they've destroyed their credibility with predatory filth. So he's inventing a new niche for himself. That's nice. I call myself what did he say? A costume performer, a costume artist. It just so happens that I wear the costume of a drag queen, and everybody and the side I support says they are forced to hate me. And we'll see how it goes from there. Interesting to note that it's happening, and that's really about it. I don't know what to tell you about it. Well, let's see. I've got another story of another person isolated from their world, I guess, by the confluence of events. I think I have another story in here somewhere that might be about the same person. I'm not sure. Here we are. Oh, no. Well, yeah, maybe not. The Washington Post piece, I'm going to open it up to see if we're talking about the same person or not, from back on March 12th. But here I think a different person, maybe same tough situation, different person, or let's find out. We'll open up both articles. Yeah, it is two different people. What do you know? All right. Well, which one do I start with then? The March 12th one, or the current one? Well, let's start with March 12th just for fun. And do it chronologically. Ex-Trump aide at Fox wrestled with election claims, network's interests. So I think growing out of the Dominion lawsuit, but difficulties for two different people, which is to say lots of people, but only two will be profiled here. Documents show Fox Vice President Raj Shah privately derided the White House's narrative of a stolen election, as many of them did, but he also pushed back on efforts to dispute the claims, as so many of them found was necessary in order to maintain their work at Fox. And now, of course, it may cost them all everything because Dominion has it all on record. Rosalind Helderman and Josh Dawsey reported this again, some 2 weeks plus ago, back on March 12th, as Rudy Giuliani railed about voter fraud from the lobby of the Republican National Committee's headquarters a few weeks after the November 2020 election. Rivulets of hair dye running down the side of his face. An executive at Fox Corporation let loose in text messages with his reaction. This sounds, and now in all caps, so effing crazy. BTW, by the way, which he doesn't capitalize. So back off of the, basically just reserving the capitals for so effing crazy. This sounds so effing crazy, by the way, wrote Raj Shah, who had served as a senior aide in Donald Trump's White House for 2 years before his hiring at Fox, which shouldn't have made him any less MAGA-y, right? Rudy looks awful, a deputy wrote back, prompting Shah to respond that, quote, he objectively looks like he was a dead person voting 2 weeks ago. It's not the description I would have given, but okay. But Shah's job at Fox was to protect the company's brand, then under pressure from Trump allies who wanted to push Giuliani's wild claims of a stolen election and who were abandoning the network for more hardline options like Newsmax and One America News. So, when a Fox News reporter went live on air just after Giuliani's news conference and concluded and declared that some of what the president's lawyer had said was, quote, simply not true, Shah, who had just done the opposite, reacted with alarm, although it's the same as alarm is the same. It's just it took a different position. This is the kind of S word that will kill us, he texted the deputy. We cover it wall to wall and then we burn that down with all the skepticism. Untenable. Incoherent. The texts are drawn from more than 1 million pages, of internal Fox correspondence released in recent weeks as part of the defamation lawsuit filed against the company by Dominion Voting Systems. You know all about that. The cache has revealed how Fox executives, producers, and hosts expressed private doubts about Trump's false election claims, even as the network amplified the allegations on the air. The emails and texts involving Shah offer a particularly vivid example of the pattern, demonstrating how elements of Fox, the Republican Party, and then the then president's own staffers spent years accommodating some of Trump's worst impulses and amplifying some of his lies. You already know about the pattern because we've heard about so many people who did it from inside the White House, etc. And the pattern continues. As I mentioned, today's story offers a new example of this. But let's continue on with the old example for just a little bit more, just to see how many more parallels there might be. When it came to the baseless election fraud narrative, including that counting dead voters had lifted the Democrats to victory, many of these people were aware of the likely falsity of the allegations, but were unwilling to anger Trump or his supporters by clearly stating so publicly. Shah is, and I guess in this sense, I don't know who's crazier, the drag queen trying to still find a way of fitting in, even though eventually one of the MAGA people could actually, it's a real possibility, drag him out of the place and beat him to death behind the convention hall of CPAC and be cheered as a hero for doing so. And I guess these guys probably thought they were walking a tightrope too, and they decided instead to knuckle under. I guess the drag queen is the braver of the two, continuing to fight on. Anyway, Shah is also a reminder of how Trump's operation had become fused to the nation's most watched conservative news channel, whose coverage had helped fuel his rise before his 2016 election. Shah was part of a long line of Trump underlings who passed back and forth between Trump's orbit and Fox's on and off-air ranks. Former Fox News co-president Bill Shine was hired as deputy White House chief of staff in 2018, picked in part because Trump was impressed by his experience overseeing television that appealed to the conservative base. That same year, one of Trump's closest advisors, Hope Hicks, was named head of corporate communications for New Fox, the successor to Fox News's parent company, 21st Century Fox, after a 2-year stint in the White House. She left Fox to return to the Trump administration in March of 2020 as the re-election campaign heated up. Numerous Trump aides found post-government jobs as pundits on Fox's airwaves. In the lawsuit, scheduled to go to trial in Delaware next month, Dominion argues that Fox defamed the company by broadcasting falsehoods claiming its machines were used to help Joe Biden defeat Trump. Fox has said it was covering newsworthy claims, not promoting or endorsing them, and has accused Dominion of distortions and misinformation in their PR campaign to smear Fox News and trample on free speech and freedom of the press. Shah, who remains at Fox, declined to comment through a company spokesman. Before joining the White House, Shah, 38, worked for the Republican National Committee in 4 election cycles, focusing on opposition research against Democrats. As the party's research director, Shah led the 2016 efforts to promote stories related to Hillary Clinton's use of a private email server and her work at her family's foundation. After Trump won, Shah became a White House spokesman in an administration where the top figures often battled to be in the news media and in the Oval Office. Shah liked to keep a lower profile, only occasionally speaking on camera, and unlike many others, reluctant to angle for one-on-one meetings with the president. John Kelly, a former Trump chief of staff, said he had been impressed by Shah's competence in the chaotic White House. Shah was popular among competing factions of the White House staff, 5 former administration officials said. He never struck me as that much of a Trump devotee, Kelly said. He seemed to be the kind of guy that was trying to do a good job in a really difficult environment, and he was a straight shooter, which of course means that guy's going to land in trouble at some point and be a big liar, straight shooter. In 2019, Shah left the White House and briefly worked for a major pro-Trump lobbyist and donor, Brian Ballard. He understands crisis communications at a very high level, Ballard said. Shah then took a job as a senior vice president at Fox Corp, where he came recommended by fellow White House alum Hicks. He arrived as the company was facing newly organized criticism of its coverage and boycotts of its advertisers. He testified in a January lawsuit deposition that he was hired to conduct brand protection for Fox and its properties, including Fox News. One of his main jobs is to monitor problems, negative stories, online threats, rising criticism that could affect the company's bottom line and orchestrate ways to defend the hosts and the network. And that's sort of a good segue, perhaps, at this point. They segue into this story as well when they talk about protecting the bottom line, where they were directed. Remember Tucker Carlson's complaints that basically the stock price was suffering from not supporting Trump enough in claims that they knew to be untrue. And so they went ahead and said, well, let's protect the bottom line and the stock price and our pay structure rather than actually reporting the news. Shah has relied on right-wing social media influencers to defend some of the criticisms and has hired consultants at times. A former Fox employee said Shah worked closely with Tucker Carlson's team and was trusted by the primetime hosts as a vigilant defender against critics. He also served at times as a liaison between Fox executives and the primetime hosts. There was a need for someone who could spot and put out political fires, the former employee said. In the documents, Shah emerges less as Trump's man on the inside at Fox than as a bridge between the then president's world and the network, and a reliable translator of Trump's base for Fox's management. After Fox News called Arizona for Biden on election night earlier than other networks, part of Shah's job became to manage the rage of Trump and his supporters. In testimony to the House committee investigating January 6th, Hicks recalled that it was Shah whom she contacted on election night to find out how Trump's team could complain about the Arizona call. She testified that Shah suggested the White House contact Jay Wallace, the president of Fox News, and provided his phone number. And that wasn't nice of him to do as an insider. In private text messages the following day, Shah made clear that he personally believed that Fox News' decision desk had probably been correct when it concluded that Trump could not overtake Biden's narrow lead in the key swing state, even though the votes were still being tallied. What is the latest from Trump world? A Washington lobbyist texted Shah, "Are we done, or is Arizona really still in play?" I really think Arizona is in play. I'm also seeing Fox's perspective, where we called it early and we are catching heat for this, Shah responded. By the following week, anger at the network among Trump supporters had spiraled. Shah became concerned that Fox's viewers might be tuning out. So at this point, we're only about halfway through the story about Raj Shah. But I wanted to get on record that there's a news story over at NBC News, this one filed by Sarah Fitzpatrick, focusing on someone entirely different, but apparently probably some parallel reasoning. Ex-Tucker Carlson producer files new claims Fox News lawyers coached her testimony in this Dominion lawsuit. Wow. What's happening here? Abby Grossberg sued Fox last week, alleging that she was coerced into giving misleading testimony about the network's election fraud coverage, and she was fired on Friday. That'll have an impact on the trial as it just begins. The former Tucker Carlson producer who sued Fox News last week, Fox News being sued by everybody, I guess, alleging that she was pressured into giving misleading testimony about the network's coverage of supposed election fraud, has filed new allegations about coercive coaching by Fox lawyers, bias and unprofessional behavior by staff members, and retaliation by the network. This is actually a different situation, but all still related to the Dominion suit. In papers filed Monday morning, Abby Grossberg seeks to correct the September 14th deposition she gave about the network's coverage of Dominion voting systems, which she says was tainted by pressure from Fox lawyers. Grossberg alleges she was not able to see a transcript of her testimony before it was made part of the record, even though she requested a chance to see it 6 times, while male colleagues were allowed to see their transcripts. Ooh, that's an interesting twist. She says she was able to review and correct it only more than 5 months later after she retained her own attorneys. Based on what I understood and took away from the deposition preparation sessions that I had with Fox's legal team, which were coercive and intimidating, Grossberg said in an unredacted errata sheet filed in Delaware, I felt I had to do everything possible to avoid becoming the, quote, star witness for Dominion, or else I would be seriously jeopardizing my career at Fox News and would be subjected to worse terms and conditions of employment than male employees, as I understood it. Amended complaints Grossberg filed Monday morning in Delaware and New York add claims against Fox News for retaliation and discrimination and provide more detail about the alleged action by Fox lawyers during the deposition prep. Grossberg says in the amended New York complaint that the lawyers wanted her to downplay the importance of ratings in decision-making at Fox, and that she felt, quote, pressured to respond with a generic, I do not recall, whenever she had the opportunity, even if she, in fact, did have a recollection, albeit perhaps not a perfect one. The amended New York complaint also says Fox attorneys would repeatedly say to Grossberg, who really can/does recall anything, thereby fraudulently inducing her to deny facts that she knew to exist. She says the attorneys also intimated that she should not reveal how she was unable to read and react to all the email warnings Dominion had sent to Fox News because of inadequate staffing and lack of resources. She said she was instead supposed to indicate that, quote, nothing fell through the cracks at Fox News. Grossberg sued Fox News in Delaware and New York on March 20th. Fox fired her on Friday, alleging she acted, quote, contrary to express instructions of the company by disclosing allegedly privileged information in Dominion's, you know how much, $1.6 billion defamation lawsuit against Fox. Grossberg alleges in the alleged complaints that her firing was retaliation for taking legal action. Probably was. Sure. In a statement to NBC News, Grossberg's attorneys, Parisis Philippatos and Tanvir Rahman, called her firing late Friday afternoon the latest act of thinly veiled retaliation and emphasized that Grossberg, a former senior producer and head of booking for Carlson, was asserting her civil rights in her lawsuits, which allege the network's lawyers coached and coerced her, as you know, into giving misleading testimony and conspired to blame her for Fox's coverage of the conspiracy theories promoted by former President Donald Trump and his allies. They were going to say that she was the one, I guess, forcing them to cover that stuff. That's interesting. We will pursue Fox News and protect Miss Grossberg in any way and every court necessary until her truth prevails and justice is done. In a statement, Fox News spokesperson said she's full of crap, basically. I don't know. We'll skip that and jump down a paragraph while we roll our outro music and see if we can't grab a few other couple of facts before we have to leave for the day. Only about halfway through this article, too. Grossberg's new Delaware filings include an errata sheet about her original deposition, meaning her corrections, amendments, and reasons for amending her original statement. On Monday, her attorneys also submitted a complaint to the Federal Equal Employment Opportunity Commission and a complaint to the New York City Commission on Human Rights about Fox's possible lack of compliance with the City Commission's previous mandates. In her suits, Grossberg alleged that Fox wanted her and Maria Bartiromo, the Fox business anchor for whom she worked before Carlson, to take the blame for the network's coverage of Dominion and unsubstantiated claims of voting fraud in the election. She also made a series of allegations about crude, sexist, and misogynistic behavior at the network. In her new filing, she says, a male producer watched a video of Representative Murdery Trader Green, as we know her, doing CrossFit exercises and called her a eunuch. I don't even know what to make of that at this point. Okay, well, very interesting. Perhaps we'll explore the rest of these articles, and I'll explore them off the air and tell you if there's any more you need to know about this, but some weird developments there, no doubt about it. And, of course, now time for less weird developments, maybe some weird ones, too, with Justice Putnam and the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. They can get into the weird stuff
From
just as easily as we can.
networksradio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
All right, some of the collections from around the country and around the world. A federal judge ruled the Internet Archive is not a library. Okay. Oregon wants to alter its long-held land use restrictions to lure chip makers to the state. And California looks to spend some Medicaid money on housing. That's pretty West Coast for you. Stay tuned. We'll see you tomorrow.